Today, I am joined by CT. CT is a former pro football player turned trainer and proud girl dad who's redefining what it means to stay athletic through fatherhood. He's the creator of the Athletic Dad Training Program, helping dads reclaim their strength, stamina, and edge so they can show up fully for their families without losing themselves. Whether he's training clients, building community, or podcasting in a cutoff with a coffee in hand, CT is on a mission to lead the anti-dad bod movement and prove that being a dad is just the beginning of peak performance. CT, I'm so curious about your foundation, who you are, and your identity. When you think about who you were before starting your football career, what kind of kid were you?
I was curious. I grew up in a family who supported sports and athleticism and trying new things. And I remember playing different sports every season. And my favorite sport was always the sport I was playing at the time. So whether I was swimming or playing soccer or playing football or basketball or baseball, that was always my favorite thing to do. And I grew up with a very athletic sister who I loved. I mean, I have amazing childhood memories of going to watch her play softball, and she was a track athlete. She threw shot and disc all the way through college at Indiana University, and so I was basically the kid running from sport to sport. Changing in the car, uh, drinking orange juice for energy, and then getting home and talking to my sister and seeing what she did and what athletic things that she did and accomplished that day. And then the next morning I would go out and try to do that same thing before I then went to the next sporting event. So I was always a kid who was drawn to sports, and I love sports, and a super athletic family. Had a lot of friends. So whatever other friends were into, I would try. I just had honestly the best childhood, the best parents, the best family. And I was very lucky to have that because they have been a major influence on the person that I'm able to become now. And ultimately the husband and the coach and the father and the dog dad and everything, was because I had such a great foundation growing up.
If you could go back to when you were a kid and just remember that feeling, what was it exactly that lit you on fire so early on in your life?
Great question. Um, I really do remember wanting to do everything my sister did. She was always my hero. She was somebody who I thought she was so cool, and she had so many friends, and she was into so many things. And she's 4.5 years older than me. So she could have easily picked on me. She could have easily beat me up. She could have easily kicked me out of, the basement when she was playing with her friends, but she didn't. And I always asked her, when I grew up and I started to recognize that, and I said, "Hey, I have friends who have older sisters who don't have as good as relationships as we do. What was it?" And funny story, my parents tell me was, um, when again, I'm an emotional dude. I get this from my father.
No, please.
But before I was born, my sister bugged my parents and said, "I want a baby brother. I want a baby brother. I want a baby brother." And my parents said, "Hey, let's give it a shot." My dad was older. My dad had me at 45 years old. My mom was in her 30s. They didn't think it was possible, but my sister just bugged him enough to have a baby brother. So the moment I got here, she took it upon herself to do the best she could do to raise me. And so again, she's somebody who I have. My arms are covered in tattoos, my back's covered in tattoos, and 5 or 6 of these tattoos are for my sister because I just think she's, I mean, honestly, one of the best human beings on the planet. So, again, I wouldn't be the person I was today if it weren't for her. And she's always pushed me to be better and to be the best person I can be. And from her telling me enough, I now have the confidence and the competence to believe that I truly can make an impact. And now as a father, I'm just trying to do my best to kind of walk in her footsteps and make her proud of always her baby brother.
What's your favorite tattoo of the 6 that you have for your sister?
That's a great question. So probably the most meaningful is I have on my wrist here, if you can see it, I've got the word inspire written in her handwriting. And I got it because when she had her first child, Ty, who's now 15 years old, so he's grown up, he's doing his thing, he's a high school athlete, he's amazing. I remember being over there at their house, and she was with him, and he wasn't having a great day. He woke up from a nap, wasn't feeling good, had to get up and get going, didn't want to get dressed, was upset, was crying, and I remember my sister just being so calm and so chill and so patient. And again, I at that time, I this is 15 years ago, so I'm 30. I was in my early 20s. I had no interest in being a father. Didn't want to be a father. I thought for a long time I wasn't going to be interested in being a father. But there was something about that moment that really inspired me to practice patience, to practice empathy, to practice gratitude. And a couple months later, I had her write that word inspire, and I tattooed it on me. And so I think about it all the time now. Um, so that's probably my favorite one. Um, and a couple of the other, she has called me Bud Bud her entire life, which now at 38, I'm kind of like, maybe don't have to be Bud Bud anymore. But I have,
We can maybe step
yeah,
back a
yeah,
little bit
yeah,
from that.
maybe. But I've got Bud Bud in her handwriting tattooed on my thumb. And my family, we always wrote a ton of notes. And my dad had a thing he would write at the end of it, and I had a thing. And my sister would always just write her J, so I have just the J from her. But again, I mean, just a huge inspiration of mine. And she's the homie, so I always appreciate her so much.
Well, I love that so much. I have 5 brothers in total, and if they don't get my handwriting tattooed on them in the future, I'm gonna be pissed now,
Right,
honestly.
right. Well, that's I put her in a tough spot because I have a lot for her. I've got some for my dad, my mom, all their handwriting, my nieces and nephews, not their handwriting, but their names. So a lot of pressure on them. I've got my wife's handwriting. I've got, again, my dog and some things for my baby. So like everybody's pressured now to make sure that they have tattoos to represent either their dad or their uncle or their brother. Um,
Yeah,
but
right. That's
it's
great.
probably a slippery slope that I started there, but it's all good.
No, that's great. I am also a tattoo person, so but I this is gonna make me sound bad now. I don't get anything. Actually, I have one. I have one for my brothers on my arm. It's
There you
like
go.
6 dots, so 1 representing me and then 5 representing my brothers, of course, but the rest are just, like, places that I've been to. I get a tattoo for, like, every new country that I've been to, so I'm also a tattoo person, and I think it's, like, so special being able to get someone else's art put onto your body,
Yeah.
and so at what age did you get your first tattoo?
So I wanted my first tattoo at 16 when my grandfather passed, and fortunately, my parents weren't on board with that. And after about 2 years of me talking about it and talking about it and talking about it, I remember my mom saying, "Okay, this is something that you obviously want, and so you know." You're 18. You can go get it if you want to, but they allowed me to do it, and everything I have again represents my family. I wish I had tattoos that I could just like tonight go get. Um, but I overthink those things, and so I never do. But they tell a story, and I was never super creative. I was never super artistic. But now this is kind of like my expression of art. It might be other people's artwork, but I think it's every single tattoo has a story. Everything represents something. We could do another couple hour podcast on what they all mean, but they're also important to me, and so they're special when I see them. And I know I love them. And again, it's just kind of every chapter of the book. I just add more and add more, and I'm happy where we're at now. And it was funny because I remember saying a couple years ago, like, this is probably it. I'm probably done. And then big life event happens, and you get a tattoo to represent that. And a big life event happens, and so here we are.
Yeah, and at the age of 16, were you also playing sports at this time, and what were you playing, if so?
I was, yeah. So I was a three-sport athlete in high school. I was a football player, played basketball, and ran track. And tattoos weren't super popular. Again, this is like when I graduated 2005 from high school, right? So like early 2000s. None of my friends had tattoos. That wasn't anything super important or that people thought about. But there's an athlete named Allen Iverson who was a basketball player in kind of the 90s. And he's a guy who I looked up to, and he kind of changed the game of the NBA with not only his play style but his look. And I thought he was um, so cool and so fun to watch. And he had tattoos, and I remember thinking like, yeah, one day I'm gonna have those. And here I am,
Nice.
a grown up who still appreciates athletics and still likes artwork and tattoos. And now I have a bank account like a grown up, so I'm able to spend it on things I want. And
You can spend it on
some
feeling,
of that goes
totally.
to getting tattoos. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. And at this time, did you start realizing that your body and your drive could take you further into professional sports? Or at what moment did you realize that you wanted to go into professional sports?
Yeah. So, again, my sister was on the track team at Indiana University. And I remember thinking it was so cool in the spring to be able to go out and watch her on the can't really say run track because she was a thrower, but see the events that she did. And I remember just being so impressed by the way, not only physically by the way these athletes looked, but by the way they moved. You could just tell when an athlete walked that they were capable of doing really special things with their body. And I remember kind of thinking about looking at everybody else in the stands and thinking like, oh, this person moves different than everybody else. And I wanted to be that outlier. I wanted to be the person who finished first and everybody cheered for. And I was shy growing up, and I remember the first time I scored a touchdown, everybody cheering for me, and I remember thinking that was so cool. Like, oh, this is people like this. People like people who can put a football in the end zone. People like people who can throw a football for a touchdown. People like a baseball player who can hit home runs. So I always thought that was so cool, and the lifestyle looked pretty cool too. Being able to travel around and play sports. Um, but I knew that there were a lot of things, and probably the thing that I take from it the most was there are tons of amazing athletes. And for every story that an athlete made it and had a successful career and it was highly recognized and highly celebrated, there's another individual who had that talent, just didn't have the work ethic to line up with that. And I remember thinking, okay, whether I have the talent or not, I am going to be the hardest person, the hardest worker in every single room that I walk into. So in high school, I was 98 pounds. I was 5'8", 98 pounds. You're not really going to be a football superstar at that size. So I remember thinking, okay, I better start eating. I better start training. I better start becoming the person I want to become. And fortunately, my best friend, still a best friend to this day, best man at my wedding a couple years ago, he would pick me up at 5 in the morning and we'd go to the high school weight room and we would lift weights. And then a couple hours later, we would lift weights again in weight room class. And I remember liking the feeling of that. And I remember liking having people telling me that I was working hard. I remember liking seeing what that looked like. And it was just something that I never got away from and that I was always drawn to. And so still at 38, it's something that I do all the time. And I get other benefits from it now. Um, but the biggest moment in my playing career was when I earned a scholarship to play Division I college football. And I actually was on the team, so I walked onto the team at Indiana University. And then August 30th of 2009, I remember the day very vividly. Um, I got to tell my parents that they didn't have to pay for school anymore, and that somebody had recognized the hard work that I'd put in for the last 18 years and said, you know what, you've worked hard enough. You're a good enough player. We want to congratulate you with a college scholarship. And again, you can hear in my voice, it just was so important and such an awesome day. And that feeling that when I got to tell my mom and I got to tell my dad, like, hey, don't worry about paying for school anymore. I got it. Was a feeling that I've kind of been chasing ever since then, and been able to feel that a couple more times at the professional level. Um, but just being able to look at my parents and tell them basically, thank you for the support and for everything you did was so impactful for me. And it was a feeling that I'll never forget. And again, something that I'm always kind of chasing.
Yeah. Why was it so meaningful for you to have that opportunity to tell your parents that?
They'd just done so much. They'd done so much. They'd sacrificed everything. In high school, you thanks for bringing these things up. I haven't thought about these things in years. There are about 3 years where every time I saw my father, he was asleep. And I remember thinking, am I ever going to see my dad again? And it was because he was working 4 jobs.
Wow.
because he knew that I was going to try to go play sports in college and somebody was going to have to pay for it. And so I would see him when I got up in the morning. I would go in and say bye when I was off to school and he was asleep. And when I would get home from school and he'd be asleep because you know, he would have to find those times to sleep. And it was in the day. He worked overnight. He worked 3 jobs during the day. I mean, just unbelievable, just an unbelievable act of kindness and the most unselfish thing you could ever do. And my mom worked all the time too. Um, and so I just, every time I trained, man, I remember thinking like, I just gotta, if I put in half the amount of work that they put in for me and my sister, that I would be able to repay them, for lack of a better term. Um, and still, still to this day is I'm working hard because they instilled that in me, and I think they're pretty proud of the guy I've become. At least I hope so. Um, but it's just very important to me to be that person who they work so hard for.
Isn't that incredible just having parents who are willing to support you no matter what your dreams are? I find that a lot of the people that I talk to on this podcast have supportive parents, and you've become a dad recently, and I'm sure that's something that you want to bring into your daughter's life as well. But it's so special having parents that are there for you and show up for you, even if it's not physically there, but like
Right.
your parents were there for you to like follow your dreams and go after your goals, and that's showing up in a different way, but still in a beautiful way, you know?
And how many things did they want to pursue that they didn't? When
Mhm.
they had my sister, when they had my brothers, when they had me. Again, just so unselfish. And you don't realize it in the moment, because I'm sure at 10, 11, 12, I'm sure I was annoying. I'm sure they could have just been like, quiet,
Screw
go in
this
the other
guy.
room, screw this kid. Yeah, I could see, I understand that style of parenting because I get it. But I talk to parents every day at the gym, and they speak so highly of their kids and want the best for their kids and are willing to pay insane amounts of money for their kids. And I never understood it. I finally get it. I finally get it. When you see them born, your life changes. And it's so impressive when you see people have success when they don't have that solid family foundation, because there are, as many, probably more individuals who are successful without a solid, family at home, um, than who are. I'm just so lucky and I'm so grateful. And I just have to, I remind myself every day. I mean, the first thing I do in the morning is wake up and 30 seconds, 60 seconds, whatever that is, just like practice gratitude. And I'm happy I woke up, and I'm happy that I have another day to pursue greatness, for lack of a better term. Um, but I just know how much they gave up for me, and I know now how much my wife has already given up in 6 months for our child. And I just want our daughter to know as she grows up that she's got 2 parents who love her more than anything, and are willing to do more than anything to be able to support her hopes and her dreams. Um, and I can only hope in 30 years that she's on a podcast saying the same thing about my wife and I, and I hope she is. But we've done everything that we could do so far. And I know it's going to get hard, and I know those moments are going to come, but we've got such a great base and a foundation of love and friendship, my wife and I do, that, there's, I think only positive things coming in our future.
Wow, I wanna dive deeper into this for sure, but I wanna go back first to your
Yeah.
career, as a professional athlete before we get back into that. Can you tell me a little bit more about your transition from college to professional athlete?
Yeah. So I played 5 years at Indiana University, and I was fine. I'm playing against the best athletes on the planet. So, anybody to even get on the field with some of the guys who I was playing with, I remember thinking that was a pretty impressive thing. Um, but when I got done and I graduated, had a couple opportunities with NFL teams, just some conversations, some phone calls, some workouts, but nothing ever really worked out. And I got a phone call from the Arena Football League, and they said, "Hey, we've got an opportunity for you to continue playing football professionally, if that's something you'd be interested in." And I said, "Yeah, absolutely." What's the Arena Football League? Right. And I kind of was like, I'll do it. Just let me know what it is. It gave me the opportunity to travel. So as soon as I graduated, I went out to Oklahoma City, then I went to Iowa, then I went to Chicago, then I went to Tulsa, then I went to Philadelphia, and I worked out for all these arena football teams and had a little bit of success. And some coaches liked what I did, but I didn't really fit anywhere in their offense or on their team at the time. And so I spent a couple years kind of bouncing around and trying to figure it out. And at that same time, I was getting into fitness, and I did that intentionally because I knew wherever I could play, I could also train people. I could also, be at a gym because there are gyms everywhere. And then finally, 2012, I landed a spot on the Iowa Barnstormers in the Arena Football League, and I played for 2 years there. Again, just kind of a role player. Um, Started, played, had some success, but it wasn't until 2014 when I came to Cleveland, where I'm at currently, and I worked out for a team called the Cleveland Gladiators at the time and made the team there. And over the next 4 years, I became one of the franchise's best all-time leading receivers. Played with some great quarterbacks, played on some really good teams, played for amazing coaches, and then kind of really, really caught my groove. So played for 4 years there in Cleveland. 2018, they shut the team down, so I moved to Albany, New York, which is a place that I thought I would never end up. And I said, I'm going to play for 6 months, and I'm going to get out of here. And then I get out there in 2019, and I fall in love. And now Albany is a place that I love with all my heart, and I have family out there, and that's where I met my now wife, and we moved to Cleveland in 2020, and got married in 2023, and that was after a 10-year professional football career. But just playing football in the Arena Football League opened so many doors for me, and the position I'm at in the gym that I'm currently at with the company I'm in, I met through playing football. Again, I met my wife through playing football. So it's something again that I'm just so grateful for that I took that call that day and decided to really go out on a limb and try something that not a lot of people had done, not a lot of people were doing. And that was, to try to play sports at the next level. There's a crazy statistic, as I'm sure you've heard tons of times, like whatever. This many high school athletes play college sports. This many college athletes play professional sports. This many professional athletes play, and have a decent career professionally. And I wasn't making the type of money they're making in the NFL, but the experiences that I got to play in China for a couple months, an amazing experience, which I got a tattoo when I went
Awesome.
out there. And I have my best friends, right? Like almost my entire, well, I'd say like 3/4 of my groomsmen at my wedding I met playing football. It was just such a blessing for me, and it was never a path that I thought I'd be able to pursue, but I found the right coach who put me in the right position. And again, I always relied on my work ethic, and I was always willing to outwork people and try to figure out ways to get an advantage. And I was able to do that for a long time, and had a lot of success and just made incredible friends and amazing memories.
For the listeners who don't know what arena football is, could you give a quick blurb?
Yeah, so the kind of the height of arena football would have been the mid '90s. So John Elway owned a team, Ron Jaworski owned a team. These are kind of big names in the football world. And what it was built because the outdoor game is a little slow for football fans. You'll finish a game 7-14 or 21-14. You'll go to a game for 3 or 4 hours and see 3 touchdowns. The arena game was built around high scoring offenses. So instead of having a 100-yard field, we played on a 50-yard field, so half the size. Instead of 22 people being on the field at once, it was 16 on the field. And we would literally play on a hockey rink or a basketball court with turf on top of it. So there's nets on either side, there's walls on either side, and I scored in a game 6 touchdowns, right? So some guys in the NFL would score 6 touchdowns in an entire season. We were scoring 70, 80, 90 points a game. And it was really fun for families. You would sit right on the sideline. So I would go line up as a receiver all the way out to the wall, and I would talk to fans. I mean, they'd be right here, right next to you. And it's fan friendly, and it is so fun. And the fans have access to players that they don't have in the NFL. You're always 30 yards from the NFL players, can't get anywhere near them. The Arena Football League, they said, our game is based around the personalities of the players. And that also fit my style too. I liked that. I liked talking to people, and I liked wanting to know what brought people to games, and I liked meeting people's friends and family who would come to games. And so it really fit my kind of my style of play and my personality. And again, the fact that I was able to do it for 10 years, I mean, almost injury free was a blessing. Um, Again, I mean, now I have friends and family all over the place through the Arena Football League. And if you want to see what it looks like, you can always, kind of look to the stuff up on Google or on YouTube. And they have some leagues going on right now, some smaller leagues. The Arena Football League itself hasn't been able to come back in full effect since kind of post COVID. But they're doing their best. They've got some teams. Albany still has a team, so my wife and I still support that team. But it is a really fun, really exciting, really aggressive version of the outdoor game of football.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
And I know arena football doesn't always get the same spotlight as the
Right.
NFL. Did that ever impact your motivation or sense of self-worth?
People get into the AFL to try to get to the NFL, right? It's like everybody wants to play on that stage and at that level, but there's only so many roster spots on the NFL. So what I appreciated so much about arena football is it gave players who had the talent, who had the skill set to be able to play on Sundays. It gave them an opportunity to continue to play and to continue to pursue sports at a high level. And, I played with guys who I was in the locker room with them on Tuesday, and they got a call Tuesday night and were signed to an NFL team on Wednesday. So the difference in talent was very minimal. In my mind, it was always the difference was the opportunity that the NFL player got that the AFL player didn't get. I mean, I played with guys who would have had incredible careers in the NFL, but just maybe were a little too short or a little undersized or didn't play at a big enough college. But the talent level at the Arena Football League was always incredible. So you're always driven, you're always motivated to try to make it to the top level of whatever it is you're pursuing. But after 4 or 5 years, the Arena Football League became my NFL. So I approached it like it was the NFL. I rested and recovered and trained like I was playing for the NFL. And I had a couple times where, people recognize you and treat you like an NFL player, and that was always cool. Um, but one time when I was 25 years old, I was actually out at a bar in Indianapolis, and a gentleman came up to me and he said, "You're Colin Taylor, right?" And I said, "Yeah." And he was like, 58 touchdowns, 2,000 receiving yards last year with Cleveland. Blah, blah. And I was like, yeah, yeah. Are you a fan? And he said, no, I'm actually a scout for the Indianapolis Colts, and we've been watching
Mm.
you for 3 years. And he said, I keep trying to get you in, but the problem is your breakout season, you were 24 years old, and
Mm.
that's old for the NFL. And so it really took that one guy telling me that to say, you know what? The work that I put in was worth it. I was on somebody's board. But I don't look back and think missed opportunities. I'm just so grateful that I got to do what I could do for 10 years. And the experiences that I experienced. So I was never upset I didn't make it. It would have been cool, but still, like, the Arena Football League was my NFL, and I was blessed to be able to do that for so long.
Yeah. It sounds almost like an ego thing, right? Like, once
Totally.
you can kind of put your ego behind and be like, "You know what? Like, I'm doing this for the love of, like, being a athlete," then I think it becomes a different situation, and something that I think a lot of people have a difficult time with is putting their ego aside, especially in athletics. How
Absolutely.
did ego play a role in your internal world during those 10 years?
Yeah, it's massive. I mean, it's at 38, I even try to tell myself I don't have an ego anymore, but I know I do. I know when I get in the weight room, I know that's a place that I'm comfortable with. I know I can lift heavy, and I know I can sprint fast, and I know I can jump high, and my ego kind of makes sure that I stay accountable to the person that I say I am. So I leverage it as a positive thing now. But it was tough when I was younger. I held a grudge for 9 years. There was a specific coach at Indiana who I didn't think treated me the way I deserved to be treated. He didn't give me the opportunities that I deserved, that I felt I deserved, I worked for. And I spent my first 4 years in the Arena Football League doing everything to spite this guy because my ego was telling me I was better than him. I was smarter than him. If he would have given me the shot, I would have been able to show him what I was capable of. And I've told this story a couple times on some different podcasts, but I remember I scored my 100th touchdown as a professional athlete, and I decided I was going to send him the ball sarcastically and say thank you for your support, you know? Um, and I remember I went to FedEx and I had the ball and I looked at it and I said, what is this guy going to think when he gets a football in the mail from a guy that he hasn't thought about in 4 years? He's going to think this guy still thinks about me. Like I've taken this much energy out of this guy's life that like he thought this was important to do. And as soon as I thought that, I thought, you know what? Like this is not worth it. I need to do it because I want to show my niece and nephew, who were young at the time, that if they put their mind to something, no matter what it is, that they can accomplish it. And their uncle said he was going to play professional football. And against all odds, he went out and played professional football. So from that moment on, I started playing from a frame of gratitude instead of from a frame of spite and anger. And it completely changed the trajectory of my life. And I'm so grateful that I had that moment and that I have them to thank for that. Um, and again, my ego was not helpful to me early on, but now that I've been able to meditate through these feelings and pray on these feelings, I've found out that it's a positive thing for me and it helps push me forward. Because I also think, and my wife and I were just talking about it the other day, like I think my wife is 1% of the 1% of the 1%. But it doesn't matter if I think that. She's got to think that, and as
Mm,
long as she knows that, then that's going to help her in her everyday decisions she makes. Just how I think I'm 1% of the 1% of the 1%. And it's not a cocky thing, but I think there's a part of you that if you say you're going to be something, you better show up and be that person. So my ego has helped me become the coach that I am. And when I'm writing these programs, when I wrote the Athletic Dad program, I know that this is the best program for dads who want to regain athleticism because I've been able to provide that for hundreds of dads in the last 15 years. So I have the confidence and the competence to be able to do that. And it probably is my ego that continues to push me along. But as long as you're able to leverage it in a positive way, like I believe I've been able to, I think it can be an amazing tool and an amazing weapon.
absolutely. And I do want to just like dive a little bit deeper into the ego piece and that story you just told about you, and ultimately not sending that football.
Yeah.
I'm trying to like step into the shoes of a young 16 to like 23, 24-year-old man,
Yeah.
right? If you had advice for them, like for you, there was a turning point that was like, oh, I am not going to send this because I'm just giving power to this other person,
Yeah.
essentially. If you were to give advice to a young man who was dealing with their ego in a sense, like in maybe a similar way that you did, what direct advice would you give to them?
First thing I would say, and again, I can only put myself in my shoes as me as a 16, 17, 18-year-old. Um, I wanted to quit and I almost quit a couple times from whatever it was I was pursuing. You feel like you're not enough. You feel like you, what you are providing is not enough for the individuals who are the ones deciding if you are providing enough, and you want to quit and you want to stop. And I ran into those people in those situations so many times. And so I would tell myself specifically to keep going, because if I would have stopped, it would have completely changed the trajectory of my life. I wouldn't be here talking to you for sure. I wouldn't be married to the woman I'm married to currently for sure. I wouldn't have the beautiful family that I'm so grateful for now for sure if I would have stopped and changed my path. So I would tell that individual to keep going. And ultimately, you are the one who's got to look at yourself in the mirror first thing in the morning and last thing before you go to bed. And as long as you are happy with the individual that you are becoming, that's what matters. Because I think I heard a quote like the path to yes is 1,000 no's or something like that. So you're going to get beat up and you're going to get beat down, and many more people are going to tell you no than are going to tell you yes. But all it takes is that one person believing in what you have to provide. And when that comes up, you better be prepared to be the person that you say you are. And if you're not, that's when, you've got to rework the person you are. That's when you've got to figure out your values and your principles. But as long as you continue to follow the path that you truly believe is best for you and go in the direction that you say you're going to go and that you tell people that you're going to be, then when you get that opportunity, you're going to explode and you're going to end up on the moon, But if you're not prepared for that opportunity, then you won't follow that path as directly, right? So, I would tell those guys to keep going, and your opinion ultimately is the only one that matters. And keep pursuing your dreams, because I hope to be somebody who people look up to and say, again, like I talked about with my niece and nephew, I hope they look at me and say, he did it, so I can do it. I hope my daughter grows up and says, you know what, mom and dad did it, I can do it. So that's something that I really hope young people can connect to. And it's much harder now than it was when I was growing up, because I didn't have 1,000 followers on social media to tell me that I was wrong when I would do something or I would say something. And now that's what they have, if not more. So it was easier. But follow your path, and whatever you feel like you're drawn to, pursue that with everything you have, because then when you're presented with the opportunity, you'll be able to shine and really show the person that you are.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but the training work that you're doing now, a lot of the work doesn't just have to do with do this many squats and, do these. I'm not really an athletic person, so bear with me.
Yeah.
Do overhead presses,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it also involves talking to people about these subjects and talking to young people. And I do want to start diving into your work with dads, talking to dads and inspiring them and motivating them. How much of your work is actual athletics versus, more confidence and ego and sacrifice and these types of topics?
That is such a great question. So 21, 22, 23, I would have told you it's all sets and reps. It's all exercise selection. It's all the grind. It's all hustle. It's all hard work. Now I don't use any of those terms. I honestly could not care less what exercises you decide to do. And it's a big thing that I teach our interns, that I teach our younger coaches, because coming out of school, all you're taught is sets and reps, exercise selection, energy systems. Nobody ever talks about the psychological side of training. So I've been doing it for so long that I have been able to see the individuals who have the biggest changes physically, mentally, as the person who becoming the person that they're meant to become. Very, very little of it depends on day to day, those decisions that you make in the weight room. And more of it depends on your mindset, your attitude, your intentionality, your consistency. Everybody knows. Nobody wants to talk about it, but everybody knows that the only way that you can be successful is if you are consistent at something. With this kind of TikTok era where everything is fast, everybody wants something immediately. So it's so easy to sell this exercise as the thing to improve your athleticism, right? Or this exercise, this is the one thing you need to do to be strong, or this is the one thing that you need to do to be able to sprint fast. And it's so much more than that. It's showing up consistently. It's being intentional. When I get the question, which I'm always flattered by the question, but how do I end up like you? Whether it be fit or athletic or whatever that is that the individual is talking about, I say, well, you have to show up and work hard a couple days a week, and you got to make the right decisions. And you've got to do that consistently for 17 years. And if you can do that, then you'll be successful. And it's so hard for people to wrap their minds around, because in our field, what we like to do is we say, I'm going to diagnose you with a problem, and I'm the only one who can solve that problem. So that gives me something to sell, right? Buy my training because you have a problem and I'm the only one to solve it. What I've done with the Athletic Dad training program is I have a blueprint of the direction that an individual can take if they're interested in being the athlete that they were in high school or college, before they had kids, when they had all the time in the world to train, before they had any other priorities. And I've given them exercises to do and percentages and sets and reps. But my hope is, and I write about it in the ebook, that after 12 weeks, I want you to change your mindset to be the person who is athletic, who is capable of doing things that you say you're going to do. Because I know that's the only way that you're ever going to make any progress. Because if you, again, for example, run my athletic dad training program and you do it for 12 weeks and you stick to it, and by training being on your schedule, you then start having to focus on sleep. You then have to start focusing on what you're eating. You then have to start making sure that you're prepared for things to be different or things to be able to change. If you're doing all of this because you're doing the training, then you're ultimately getting everything out of it that you should be getting out of it. If somebody does the program and just goes through it and kind of does one day and then another day a couple times a few weeks later, they're never going to get anything from it. I get monetary value because you bought the program, but that's not the reason that I put it out. You know what I'm saying? Like, I put
Yeah.
it out because I want to help dads who want to achieve this certain thing. And again, in my mind, all of it comes down to mindset. And I actually presented 2 days ago, today's Saturday, yesterday, to a group of students, high school students, and they come into the gym and we talk about what we do, and they have questions about improving speed and performance and all of those things. And when I wrapped up, I said, here's what I want you to take from this. This is the most important part is at some point you will stop being an athlete. You'll stop having a coach that'll tell you when you got to show up, where you got to be, what, what time game time is. You're going to be on your own. And if you have good principles set, and if you have consistent habits that you've set, you need to stick to those because that is what's going to keep you healthy and keep you fit. If you're only relying on sports being the thing that's moving you forward and that's the only motivation that you have, as soon as that ends, you're going to stop then being that person. And then you are going to fall off the wagon. You are going to end up ultimately being somebody that you don't want to become. So I don't think, honestly, that the training and the sets and reps and the physical part has any more than, I mean, if I had to put a percentage on it, 5 or 10%, I think 90% of it is mentally how you approach it and the intentionality and everything that you do around that 1 hour that you're in the weight room. I think those are the important things. But it took me 12, 13, 14 years in the industry to be able to say that. And kind of one more story to that. When I was a college strength and conditioning coach, I was fortunate enough to work with a team who was very successful. And what happened is the first 3 or 4 games of the year, we were blowing teams out like 85-7, like 93-14. I mean, blowing teams
Wow.
out, right? And the head coach came up to me and he said, "Hey man, thanks for everything you do. Like, our team is as good as we are. We're winning these games because our strength and conditioning program is so good." And I said, "Coach, I appreciate that, but the other team has a strength and conditioning coach also, right? And they're scoring 7 points. They're scoring 14 points." I told him, it doesn't have anything to do with what we're doing in the weight room. What it has to do with, one, the players you have happen to be better. But two, is we are having these conversations with these athletes about how important it is to be focused on something, on some particular goal. For them, it's easy because they want to be college football players. They're college football players, eventually want to play in the NFL, so it's easy to have those conversations. But I'm talking so much deeper than that. They win a big game and then they want to come in and, wear flip-flops and laugh and goof off and feel like it's all good, and that they did something, that no team's ever done. It's like, hey, you just won a football game, right? Like, I need you to still show up, and I need you to work hard because you said you were going to work hard, right? I need you to be on time because you said you were going to be on time, right? And these are all things that it doesn't matter if you're a football player, a basketball player, or a baseball player, right? Like, once you get out of sports, you still need to show up on time. You still need to work hard. You still need to be the person that you say you're going to be. So I think that's such an amazing question because everybody in fitness wants to talk about sets and reps and macros and calories and squat PRs, right? But it's so much more than that. And it's so much deeper than that. And it's taken years of training and months of becoming a dad and years of therapy to actually figure that stuff out.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm great that I feel so happy that you felt so passionate about that because I think it's so true. My favorite show ever is Ted Lasso.
Yes.
And it's just that you gave me Ted Lasso vibes right now. It was never really about like winning or
Right.
about how many sets you do, how many reps you do. You were saying, it's really about the emotional piece behind all of that and how you can build great athletes. And that's what you're doing now, but instead for specific athletes, you're doing this for dads. What was the moment you knew that your mission had shifted from
Yeah.
like teaching these beliefs to athletes to wanting to teach dads about them?
Absolutely. Golly, another great question. So I have recognized in the last 15 years that the fitness industry is completely missing a demographic. And that demographic is the people who I have decided are the individuals who I want to talk to, and I want to work with the most. And again, back to my story. What happens is you're an athlete, so you pursue these things and you're sprinting and jumping and training hard and eating right. And then you get out of sports and you pursue other things, family and business and friendships and all of this. And on the exercise side, what we tell these individuals is, hey, I know you've been an athlete your entire life and you've enjoyed training this style and you know it's changed your body composition and you know you feel good and healthy and strong and fit and capable is always the word that I use, right? You got to be to play with these kids, you got to be capable. I hold my daughter up above my head all the time, right? I walk around with her. My wife and I were laughing today because we were holding her watching a sporting event. And it really, it's a really hard workout on your arms, right? Like you need to be capable. But what happens is we get out of this athletic pursuit, and then the options we have are Orange Theory, or Burn Body Boot Camp, or CrossFit, right? And not all of us want to be competitive CrossFitters. Okay. So we're not going to go do that.
Not
Not
me.
all of us, right, right. Not all of us want to do high intensity interval training where we just burn a ton of calories and then feel horrible the rest of the day. Sleep well, but then get up again the next day and then do it. And then our knees are hurting and our feet are hurting and our calves are hurting and our shoulders, and we can't figure out what the reason was. Or you get to like one of these just like group fitness places where a lot of group fitness is maintenance. I mean, at best, right? They've got dumbbells that go up to 25 pounds or 50 pounds, and you move around a little bit again and you sweat, you burn some calories, but you're never truly making progress. And what I noticed in 15 years in this industry is that there are dads who want to train like how they trained in high school and college, but you're not going to go spend $1,000 to go to some academy to train like a professional athlete, right? You're also not going to dedicate 5, 6, 7 days a week to training like you did when you were a college athlete. Some things change. Now you have money to be able to buy food, right? You can purchase a house and purchase a bed. So recovery becomes super important, right? So like, oh, I don't have to sleep on this college cot, right? I can purchase a bed that makes me feel better. And um, the problem is nobody is speaking to these individuals. And through this experience over the last 15 years, I've always trained because I've only known this style of training, which is another thing that's been helpful is I don't know any other way to train. Like I don't know how to run a group fitness. I don't know how to run an Orange Theory class. I only know how to train people like athletes. So I've always trained. I mean, one of my first clients was 86 years old. Kathy was her name. We worked together in Iowa and she was unbelievable. But we jumped and we threw medicine balls and we sprinted and we did compound movements like deadlifts and bench press. And even at 87, she came to me and she was like, CT, I'm feeling better now than I ever did when I was 60. And I remember thinking, again, the ego was like, I know what I'm doing, right? But really it was because nobody had given her this guidance and told her that it was okay to pick up a barbell at her age, right? That she shouldn't be scared to do some of these movements like squats, even though she's squatting every single day to reach down to pick something up off the ground or sitting down on the couch, right? And so we have completely missed this opportunity to take these fathers who want to be able to throw a football with their kid and not get hurt, right? Or be able to play one-on-one with their son or their daughter and not worry about popping an Achilles or tearing an ACL or pulling a hamstring, right? And I've just seen that happen so many times. And what happens is that happens to people, and they come to me and say, "Hey, I was super active. I was a college athlete, and then 10 years later, I had kids and was playing basketball and blew my ACL out, and I've never been able to train since then." It's like, why is nobody talking to these people, right? So all you need is 3 hours a week. You need a plan that makes sense, that fits your schedule, that's smart, right? That includes things like mobility and flexibility. There are movements called isometrics where you're holding positions, it's really good for strengthening tissues and tendons, kind of everything holding your bones and structure and muscles together. If you go to Orange Theory, they're not talking about that. They just want you to get more splat points, which again, I don't have any problem with people who train at Orange Theory. I just have talked to enough people who've done training like that who just don't feel good, right? So I I finally, and I said it again the other day in therapy, I said finally at 38 years old, I found my direction. I'm more clear now than I've ever been. I know this is a group of people who I think are underserved in the fitness community and who don't have enough opportunities to get solid professional level training where they can feel better, because the excuse, "Oh, I can't train like that anymore. I'm 40. I can't train like that anymore. I'm 45." Well, how do you think you're going to feel when you're 50 or when you're 60 or when you're 70? Like, I was racing my dad in his 70s. He's the original athletic dad, you know? And so it was him, it was my experience with my father, and it's been my experience with dads over the last 15 years that I know that this again is an underserved community in the fitness industry. And through my experience, I know how to work with him. I know what they need, and I understand the time constraints now of being a father. And I've been able to package all that stuff up and be able to provide it. And I know it's going to be able to help a lot of people and make a big impact.
Why do you think athletic dads are such an overlooked group? And what do you think that they need most? And what are they going to get out of doing a training program like this?
So I think a lot of people forget that these dads were athletes, that these dads were pursuing things that they wanted to pursue. I talked about it earlier. Your priorities go so far down the list, as they should, being a father, that you just then are comfortable with your fate, right? You think, I'm 30, life's over. I'm 35, I'm 40, life's over. I mean, how many times I've heard, "Oh, I could do that in my 20s, not anymore," right? It's all what people have been told and what they've seen, that you get older, you can't do this anymore. Stop jumping. You're going to get hurt. And again, I think a lot of people are uncomfortable with coaching people who are not college or high school athletes doing some of these movements, sprinting, for example, right? But if there's a fire in your house, terrible scenario, and you've got 30 seconds to get
First
out of
one
the
that comes to
house,
your head, of course.
right?
Oh.
But you got 30 seconds to get out of your house. You better be able to sprint up the steps and grab your kids. You better be able to throw your dog over your shoulder. You better be able to make sure that your wife is taken care of. And you better be able to get out of that house. I don't think any amount of high intensity interval training, doing burpees for 45 seconds, resting for 10 seconds, and doing burpees for 45 more seconds is going to help you survive that situation, right? Like, if my daughter is on a bicycle and she takes off down a hill, if I go to sprint for the first time in 20 years, there's no chance that I'm going to be able to catch her. There's no chance that I'm going to feel good and capable of accomplishing the task of running her down and grabbing her, right? I mean, there are so many situations, and you see it all over the internet, right? Where there's that viral video where I think a mom is pushing her her baby's help me with the word.
Like stroller.
Her stroller. Mom's pushing her baby's stroller, and the stroller runs away and she falls over. And then another lady goes and tries to grab it and falls over. And it's like, what a terrifying situation to be in.
Mm.
Right? So you need to train these qualities to be able to then express them in daily life. Right? How often do it, you would be shocked. And we have a rehab facility connected to our performance facility, which is very cool. So we work with athletes and parents who get hurt and then rehab and then come back and train with us. So a lot of the stuff that I do now is kind of based in rehab. I say I've kind of re-engineered the rehab training, right? Where it's not just specific and directed towards the injury, but it's more global, more for the entire body. But how many people carry bags out of Aldi and step off the sidewalk and tear an ACL?
Mm.
An insane amount. How many people pick up pickleball for the first time in 20 years and tear an ACL? I mean, it's insane. The number one injury that people that rehab facilities see are pickleball injuries.
No way.
So
Really?
if everybody's getting hurt playing pickleball, why is nobody training for the demands of pickleball? Right? So like, what are
Yeah.
you doing in pickleball? Okay, you're running, you're stopping, you're cutting, you're jumping, you're changing direction, right? You're squatting down, you're moving side to side dynamically. But nobody's doing this and everybody's getting hurt, right? So train, and the first 5 or 6 clients I had at our new gym a year and a half ago when we opened were pickleball athletes. And I said, okay, you guys don't know where to go for this. I'm happy they found me. Here's the training program. Here's what we're going to do moving forward. Oh, I've never done these things. Good, right? I'm glad you haven't, because now we're starting at baseline and we're going to get you ready to be able to play pickleball, right? And just extrapolate that, through everywhere else in the nation that they're playing, everywhere across the world that they're playing. People just don't understand that you need to train that certain way to be able to do that. So back to the original question, why is it overlooked? I think it's just because people look at fitness as a hobby, maybe, as opposed to a lifestyle. I don't care how much you back squat in the weight room. If you squat down to a couch and your knees hurt, right? Like, I want to get you out of knee pain so you can play, so you can get on the ground with your kids and roll around and feel good when you do it. I don't want you to go down on the ground and throw your back out because you're trying to pick your child up off the ground because she wants to play with you. And now you can't do that. And now you're on the couch for 3 weeks and can't move. Right. So you need to train these qualities like speed, like power, like strength, like athleticism to be able to do these things. And if you do that in training, regular life is so easy. But if you're not doing that stuff, then you pack a grocery bag and step off the sidewalk and tear your ACL.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I can hear how much your daughter, plays a role in your motivation to
Yeah.
teach dads. And I think that's something that a lot of dads can probably relate to as well, is wanting to be there for their kids, as you were saying earlier,
Yeah.
how we were talking about how we want to be able to support our kids in the best way possible to allow them to reach their goals and their dreams. And I am going to start wrapping up this podcast. And thank you so much, CT, for everything that you've talked about. I really enjoy it. Normally, when I end this podcast, I usually ask people what they would tell their childhood self. But I'm going to ask you something a little bit different. If
Oh boy.
your daughter listens to this podcast 10 years from now, what do you hope she hears in your voice?
So this is so interesting. The Athletic Dad podcast. That is my final question. I wish that I could go back and hear my father, who is alive. I wish I could go back and hear my father talk to me as a 6-month-old baby. I wish he was able to, as my family's there. Um, I wish I was able to see what he was going through. I wish I was able to see how he felt. I wish I was able to hear what he was passionate about. And my hope through this pursuit, through working with dads, through the Athletic Dad podcast, through the Athletic Dad YouTube channel, is that she can go back and when she sees it, that she knows how much of a positive effect she had on my life. And again, I plan on being around for a long time. But she is the most important thing and the coolest thing to ever happen to me. And I want her to know that there was nothing her dad wouldn't do for her, even when she thinks I'm not cool, even when mom is telling her she can't have sleepovers, even when dad says, I know you don't want to go to soccer practice today, but you need to go. I want her to know it's because everything in my being, all of the training that I've done, everything that I've been through, the negative and the positive, was to be able to give her the best opportunities that she could have in her life. And 5 years ago, I didn't want to be a father. I met my wife and I realized why people become parents. And I realized that the best thing that I feel as though I could give to this world is an extension of her mother, who I think is one of the best human beings on the planet. And now that she's here, I want her to know that everything we do, her mother and I, every single thing we do is to give her opportunities to be the best person that she can possibly be. And I hope that even through those times where she's upset with us or where she thinks dad's not very cool or where she doesn't want to go to the dance recital that her mom wants her to do, that she knows we're doing these things so she can be the best person she can possibly be. And if that happens, then everything we did was worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, CT. I have just enjoyed talking to you so much today. Thank you so much for your vulnerability and your honesty about your story and the work that you're doing with dads. And it has just been so incredible talking with you today. And I would highly recommend that anybody who's listening goes and find CT. CT, what's your Instagram?
You can find me on Instagram at The Athletic Dad. I'm also on YouTube, The Athletic Dad. And in June, we will come out with the Athletic Dad podcast. So, again, plenty of different ways for dads to find us and for dads to be able to reach out and get help. And ultimately, what I'm trying to do with the Athletic Dad podcast is allow people in the strength and conditioning field, a field that's very, like you said, ego driven, where it's all about beards and tattoos and big muscles. I want to be able to provide something that these dads' children can look back in 10 years and say, oh, my parents are pretty cool. Or, oh, my parents do care about me. Or my parents do love me. And that's the goal, because I know we've all been through it. Our parents hate us. I don't want to spend any more time with them. I get it now. I get it. So follow me on The Athletic Dad everywhere. Because I'm just trying to provide the best information for dads who feel as though they are underserved in the fitness community and want to be able to run around and play sports with their kids for as long as they possibly can. I'm here for it.
Awesome. Me too. I'm so excited for all the dads out there who are about to go through this program. I know for like a fact that I will be sending it to my dads and be like, you don't care about me if you don't do this. So
That's true. Because we got to look at, as children, right? We got to look out for our parents and make sure they're making the best decisions, for sure.
yeah, exactly. Well, thank you so much, CT. It's been a pleasure. And who knows? Maybe one day we'll talk again soon on a podcast or maybe a YouTube channel or something like that. But it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Absolutely. Pleasure's all mine. Thank you.